I was 10 years old when this account happened, in the fall of grade 5. My mother, sister, and I were visiting my aunt and uncle and their 2 sons in Kansas while on break from school. My family is from Gyeongju, South Korea, but my father is African American, so we grew up in both cultures and speak English fluently, so it wasn't hard traveling and interacting with others. My aunt is a devoted Christian and really loved bringing us to church with her and a family friend, Sandra. I would get up early and put on my Sunday best and would stumble out the door, jet-lagged, to make it to the service on time. The services always started normally. Greet thy neighbors, welcome the guest, singing, and eventually the preacher would come out and read through scripture. There were times prayers for those in the community would happen, or people coming to be saved in the form of baptism. My family normally sat in what my aunt called the best pew in the house, but we didn't sit in that pew alone. There was a man that sat between our family and another family of 3. This man, between the families, was a killer. A killer in the pews. Now I know what you must be thinking. How do I know he was a killer, right? Well, hold on, and I'll tell you what I know. Now let's get back on topic. The man that sat on the other side of my mother and next to Mr. Hooper was considered an outstanding member of the community. He was active in the church, and his kids even used to babysit around the community. All in all, he seemed just like the typical American family man. He was odd, though. Something about his mannerisms threw my family for a loop. This man used to lean over toward my mother to the point his head was almost on her shoulder, and he would take a deep inhale. And my mother would lean away towards me, almost crushing me, and promptly would ask the man, "Can I help you with something?" He smiled and just laughed a bit and shook his head. "No, just a bit," and muttered an apology for making us uncomfortable. He started, "You just smell familiar." It makes me remember something, triggers a deep memory in me. My mom just laughed it off uncomfortably and stated, "It's Sea Island cotton from Bath & Body Works." This has been my mom's favorite scent ever since I can remember. It's her signature, and if you've ever smelled it, you would know just how fresh and clean the perfume is. So maybe he just was drawn in subconsciously, closer like a moth to a flame. But as time progressed and service after service passed, he continued his sniffing ministrations. My mom eventually had enough. This man was creepy and couldn't take the hint to back off. We jumped ship and moved pews the next service to an area more towards the back. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. The man must have thought man overboard because he jumped ship and maneuvered through the worshippers to, you guessed it, sit right next to us. This cycle continued right up until we boarded our plane to go home. However, the story doesn't end here. Remember I mentioned the family friend, Sandra? Well, Sandra was a dental hygienist, and she had a neighbor who was also one of her patients and was found murdered in her own home. I will not be disclosing her name out of respect for her family and friends. But this woman, may she rest in peace, was found bound with rope and a plastic bag over her head. It was apparent she had been tortured brutally before she passed. Not long after the discovery, another body was discovered in yet again their own home, and mocking letters started being sent into the local PD station. If you haven't figured it out yet, this was the work of a serial killer, BTK, which stands for Bind, Torture, Kill. He was back after years of silence. Initially, police thought maybe it was a copycat killer, since BTK had been quiet for so long. They assumed he died or moved away, among other possibilities. The killings continued for a bit longer, and from what I remember, my aunt and uncle were on edge. Their whole community was. BTK was eventually caught, and I can't tell you all the details regarding that since I was back home in Korea. But I can tell you we received a terrifying phone call not long after. My aunt and Sandra called to inform us it was over. BTK was caught. Great news, right? We should have slept easy knowing our friends and family were safe, that they are no longer prey. BTK wasn't just a serial killer. He was the man from the Pews, the one that had sniffed my mother consistently. He was Dennis Rader. The thing that scares me most? My mom could have been on his list. She could have been a victim, all because we sat in the pews and greeted our neighbor with brotherly love. BTK, do me a favor and let's not meet again.